We decided that it was necessary to address the lack of representation in our own organizations, in our own white-led organization of sex workers. And it's a conversation that we should have. It's a gap that we have to shorten.
Racialization is the process of categorizing, othering, and marginalizing groups based on race through various social practices, tools, and systems. Today's anti-sex work trafficking and immigration activist movements are also dominated by morality politics and are still led by white radical feminists from the global north. They tend to employ a neo-abolitionist discourse that frames all sex work as, quote, modern-day slavery, which is a dangerous discourse because it obscures the current power structures and racism and other forms of interlinked oppression that harm racialized, particularly Black sex workers. Neo-abolitionism also tends to uncritically align with carceral feminism. This approach ignores the ways intersectional oppressions like racism, classism, sexism, whorephobia, and transphobia and xenophobia make racialized sex workers more vulnerable to criminalization and violence. So today's anti-sex work trafficking and immigration movements also exhibit Western patriarchal humanitarianism onto sex work, particularly those who are racialized and from the global South.
I think we are all part of this racial structures that are unjust. It can be very much of influence if we start to operate with people from the margins as well. When you come to parliament or you are going to speak with people who are policymakers that are at our side, it's very important to show the diversity and as well all the knowledge that we have within our communities. Definitely should need to be more investing as well in how to get our community more diverse and more equal.
We have to explore the different ways that criminalization processes affects racialized people. Thinking about the pandemic in terms of the policies contributing to the targeting of racialized communities, the over-targeting of racialized communities in terms of fines, pandemic fines, surveillance fines, but also generally just putting more police on the streets, which in any case targeted sex workers, but also in particular other racialized people. We say there should be a prohibition on discrimination that is done by police, but also border authorities. So contesting facial recognition, contesting predictive policing, and also contesting the more and more power technology companies are having to dictate what we can say, where and when. I really think we need to contest the notion that making something a crime will solve everything, particularly for communities that are already criminalized.
In the policy making, what we're trying to do is really to highlight how the violations, inconsistencies, and loopholes, and also the invisible cases of migrant sex workers in different frameworks. It can be in the anti-racism frameworks, with the EU Action Plan Against Racism, but also other plans that are criminalizing racialized minorities and adding an extra layer on sex workers and add an extra layer on migrants. But also that we can start addressing more the question of deportability and employment, especially when this affects disproportionately migrant sex workers.
And of course, we find a pattern, this criminalization, this policing, that it's also supported by this white mainstream carceral feminists. We are seeing this increasing in policing, cutting out rights. We started with the LGBT rights, trans rights. Again, the ones that are more affected are usually women of color, poor women. So the ones that are not able to take a flight and go to the places where those rights still persist.
There's an online harms bill in England to shut down adult services websites indiscriminately. So, we already know that workers of color have challenges even getting on the platforms or partnering with others and work together on platforms because, especially migrants are seen as like trafficked victims. But those who are able to sort of ply their trade online, all of these strategies are in the name of saving and rescuing and preventing harm among marginalized and migrant people, but they never talk to migrant people as others have said. So, of course not. They wouldn't dare talk to you because of the way that police have been behaving and the way they've been interacting with various populations, trans, people of color. Sex workers are opting out even to share anonymous intelligence. So that's a key change that we're noticing. To her experiences, she lived in London. She was a mom. She commuted and toured to Aberdeen and then was murdered. And she didn't call police when she was in harm. She called her friends. And it is that thing about the way the media then later, after she was killed, there's an article from The Sun calling her a throttled hooker. So we also have to look at media representations and how they exacerbate and dehumanize sex workers on a continuous basis.
I happen to have been racially profiled last year at the border of Denmark and Sweden, and I was held for 2 hours. We were only 2 Black people who were held for 2 hours, and we had our residence IDs. They were questioning us, they were telling us that you have the German cards, but then your nationality is Ugandan because we are asylum seekers. What happens to all these people of color who have to cross the borders, but when there's no one to document whatever is happening to them?
All of the 104 nationalities that require a visa to enter the Schengen area. It includes all African countries and nearly all the countries in Asia. So just one example of who can move safely and in what conditions. But I thought it's worth mentioning also specifically racialized women, certain nationalities being denied visas or stopped in border controls because of suspicions that they will be working in sex work or could be trafficked. The particular impacts on racialized migrant sex workers being targeted for police harassment and ID checks when working on the street, or specific immigration and anti-trafficking raids focusing on sex work venues. So that's how we can see it playing out specifically against racialized women and sex workers specifically. The EU Pact on Migration and Asylum came out just after the EU anti-racism plan. It just continues scaling up detention, dismantling fundamental rights for migrants and undocumented people in particular.
Being Roma and being sex worker is very hard, because if you don't face the issue and the discrimination about being trans or Roma trans, you will face the law that attack us on sex work. We should ask to the all feminists in this movement of anti-trans and anti-sex work. Nobody speak with a sex worker or maybe with a trans, but a lot of Roma people go from Romania to all the countries in Europe, and they are facing racism. They also face the immigration issue and the Roma. Bringing together, I think they make powerful and make a good subject for changing law in the high level. The white savior come and save us on the white horse. No, thank you. We don't want white savior. Don't exoticize me. Don't exoticize Roma community. Good job as well.
As Alejandra said, I want to make a call for action. If you are in a human rights organization, it's not racialized. Include racialized people, include racialized sex workers in your staffs, in your peers, in your research, and of course, try to compensate the times and the knowledge. Follow the lead that it's starting in Belgium. Keep up with the sex workers, keep up with the sex worker collective to listen to us, to include us, to work together with us, and supporting ASWTI and your local organizations.